I'm doing my fictional diagnosis of Princess Tiana, which is from the movie Princess and the Frog. We're gonna go over the character description, the diagnosis, evidence, treatments, and broader perspectives. Princess Tiana, she's a young black woman living in 1920 New Orleans, a time marked by strong racial and economic barriers. She works multiple jobs in order to fulfill her dream of owning her own restaurant. Her dad died while she was young. He was a hard worker, so her mom was a widow raising her, and so she still feels responsible for carrying their dream forward of getting a restaurant. Um, some things that she faces, like financial stress, racial and gender barriers, and the lack of social support. The thing that I chose to diagnose her with is persistent depressive disorder, and that's like a chronic depressed mood lasting for at least 2 years, along with symptoms such as low energy, reduced pleasure, difficulty relaxing, and the feelings of inadequacy. Um, from like a cultural and film context, she was a young black woman living in New Orleans, facing discrimination, limited job opportunities, and economic barriers. These factors make her symptoms look like hard work is normal, causing people to overlook the depression signs. Would a therapist like diagnose her in this time? They might, but they might not diagnose her correctly because mental health understanding was limited. Black women's struggles were often dismissed back then, and depression was just like mislabeled as just tired. Now, disorder diagnosed, was it like diagnosed in all cultures? Yes and no. There's like some different aspects, but some cultures can express depression as like physical symptoms, like tiredness, overworking, or social withdrawal. And like, yeah, like I said, overworking. There was like some stigma in the culture that believe people that have depression like should just push through it, or like misunderstanding high function depression and thinking depression requires like dramatic sadness when it really doesn't. And a research sentence that I found with studies show that high functioning depression is often overlooked in individuals who maintain a busy, productive lifestyle, especially in communities that value resilience as hard work. Some evidence in the movie, one symptom that she did show was fatigue, and that's when like you're really exhausted, tired, you barely have any energy to do anything. She worked multiple jobs a day, so she would go in the morning, go in at night. So that left her like barely any room for stress. An example from that movie is when she walked into her room and she basically like collapsed on her bed because she was so tired, but she like fell asleep in the same clothes that she was in because she was strained. Another symptom was reduced pleasure, which is like a decreased ability to feel joy or pleasure even during positive events. So she never relaxes or has social time. An example from the movie is when her friend Charlotte at a party was trying to get her to dance and she didn't want to do that. She chose to work instead. Um, a symptom that does not show in here, it- and that's a symptom of that, is hopelessness. And that's the feeling of believing things will never get better. Tiana always believed that her dreams will come true and that she'll make it, so she never gave up. An example from that is when her boss is telling her like she was never gonna get her restaurant, but she just refused to like give up. Okay, and now let's talk about treatment. Some treatment that I like recommend is cognitive behavioral therapy. It would help like recognize harmful thought patterns like I must work all the time to earn love or success. It will help her learn healthier balance between work, rest, and relationships, help increase activities that bring joy instead of only work, and reduce guilt when she's not working. Some ethical concerns of this is like confidentiality. And that's because there was a heavy stigma back then that was carried. So, like, the privacy would be really important. Another one is like blaming avoidance. So, try not to blame her for like overworking when the environment like that she was in like basically demanded it. And lastly, like a boundary respect, like either to respect her goals and try not to force her to change them. So, some barriers that she had was limited availability during that time. Like the mental health resources were scarce, like they weren't so common. Financial problems, her having to work like all these jobs, well, she worked two jobs to save for her restaurant could be like a struggle to afford therapy. And last was like stigma, because mental health was really not discussed much in her time. And lastly, the broader perspective, was the portrayal accurate? I'd say it's pretty accurate. It's not fully realistic, but it does show like high functioning depression traits like overworking, exhaustations, isolating, and the difficulty of enjoying life. The movie's influence on the disorder to the audience. There is some positive ones, like showing that people who look successful can still have mental struggles. Also, that show that overworking can be harmful, so get help if you need it. So negative ones is that people can see depression as functional or people need to work harder, like even if they're depressed. And lastly, they can cause people to overlook symptoms because of how strong she is as a person. These are my citations.